We have 4 items on the agenda, and we'll begin with number 1, please.
Item number 1 is the Department of Transportation reports in response to motion Han Gruel relative to an update on the progress of a memorandum of understanding between DOT and neighborhood councils.
Come forward and give us the information.
Good morning, Rita Robinson, General Manager, Department of Transportation.
Carolyn Jackson, Senior Management Analyst, Department of Transportation.
Yes,
Well,
this morning we come to give you some progress report on what we're doing with our Memorandum of Understanding. We have Mr. Draper here, Ken Draper here as well.
where is he hiding?
To assist
He's
us.
hiding behind us somewhere.
Behind us.
All right,
Can he come on down?
come on down. Take a seat. That way we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, since there's a public comment card on that. We can put that over there. Okay.
Yes, with the help of Mr. Draper and several members of various neighborhood councils, we've been meeting with the committee that worked on the Department of Water and Power Neighborhood Council with the Neighborhood Council and Department of Water and Power MOU.
Okay.
That group stepped forth and said that they would help us process an
Water and
MOU
Power
with the
was
city.
helpful?
No. The committee that worked with and Water and Power is helpful. We have some wonderful people at Water
They're
and Power.
shocked with my comment.
Yes, they can.
No comments from the audience, thank you.
Recovery
Kathy
time.
Jones Irish is helpful. and
She helps
several
everybody
members.
else.
She does. She helps all of us, thank God.
How about the other people over
But
there?
I'm not involved. But our colleagues that helped to put together the MOU with Department of Water and Power stepped forth and volunteered to assist us in putting together the MOU with the Department of Transportation. So we've started out with having several meetings of information of what does the Department of Transportation does, how that relates to what the neighborhood councils would want to have in terms of opportunities for input to the department, and then how do we make that information available on both sides of the issue. So we've met, Mr. Draper and the committee members and I and Carolyn have met several times, and then we met with the community on one occasion. One meeting was canceled, but we have another meeting set up for June.
What community?
With all of the neighborhood councils.
All of them, okay.
Right, all of them are invited, and we've met together on 2 occasions now, and we're going to meet on June 13th for another Saturday meeting to get more information and feedback from them. One of the things that we found out that I think are very important in the long run for any department that does this and for the council to realize is the amount of lead time that the neighborhood councils would like in order to have input and for them to process it through their neighborhood council. And we'd like that on the department end so that we can be sure that the neighborhood council is processed, understood the information, and can give us feedback on the information before we move forward. But I think in the future, as we put together a number of projects, whether they're Department of Transportation projects or any projects in the city, we're going to have to build in lead time for neighborhood councils to have education and information as well as feedback back to us on these processes as I read about the sign ordinances and other things the city is embarking in, and as we begin to reinvent the city from our financial mess. We will have to take into consideration how all of us work together in a cohesive way in order to be able to build that coalition together. I think we're all learning that as we go. And Mr. Draper may have comments from his side, but as we go through, we would have our meeting in June. We have a tentative meeting set up for July perhaps, and then we plan on having the document to be able to be reviewed by many of the neighborhood councils so that they can take it into consideration, as well as the city attorney, the department, and as we get to the budget process, now that we'll kind of realize what kind of staffing we'll have, we'll be able to have that kind of feedback as well, because I think that's going to play a major role in this situation as well. What kind of staff we have under what conditions, that will help us figure out how we connect together. And our hope is to have this totally wrapped up by October. Was it, Carolyn?
Well, we hope to have it out to Carolyn Jackson, LADOT. We hope to have it out to neighborhood councils by October to allow them at least 90 days to review it, spanning the holiday period. But it also depends upon the city attorney reviewing that before we release it to the neighborhood councils for their review.
And I know that the the lead time that you mentioned, they have committees, they don't meet as frequent as we meet, and then sometimes they don't have a quorum, and then it has to go back to the neighborhood council, then they have to feed it back. So there's definitely quite a bit of lead time necessary to get the information disseminated and reviewed. Mr. Draper?
Negotiations and the process is continuing nicely. Lots of good cooperation and collaboration so far. But
Explain who you represent.
I was Ken Draper with City Watch,
Okay.
and we're facilitating this process as we did the DWP MOU. We participated in the organizing of the agreement with the planning department too, which is now called Plan Check NC, but in any case. The neighborhood councils have now met 4 times. We met at one combined meeting. At the next meeting, they're ready to present content for Rita and the department to look at. Hopefully, we will make it by the October deadline, but we face the same problem that you're just talking about, in that representatives come, they speak, they have to get back to their councils and so on. But the process is working nicely. The 2 things that they're working on at this moment that we'll have for Rita on the 13th involve the timelines that we're talking about, as we did with DWP. 90 days before you raise the rates, the neighborhood councils have to be involved, and so on. The other is a rather unique idea, and it came from the beginning of the process, where lots of people couldn't untangle the difference between issues and policy and process. And a lot of people a lot of neighborhood council representatives came to the process with a lot of issues. And this agreement is about creating a process that allows people to deal with those issues and other things. So they're talking about forming a committee of neighborhood council representatives. This will be presented to Rita on the 13th, that would meet on a regular basis with her to deal with issues and not with process. And
Citywide issues or
issues
individual?
dealing with the Department of Transportation, and some of them have to do with policy. Some of them have to do with the way notification happens. Various kinds of things. I saw a complaint, not about DOT, but
DWP complaint, right?
no. This just happened. We just published this, as a matter of fact.
I'm teasing
It has to do
you.
with
You're sitting back there taking copious notes.
That actually was that was not only historic, but that's been a good MOU, the DWP MOU.
Yes, it has worked out well.
Yeah. In any case, this process is going well, and the neighbor councils are involved. We have a website and every note, every notice, all of the minutes, everything that happens is posted at nctranspo.com. All of the councils are informed all of the time. There are about 42 official representatives so far that are participating in the process, but some councils don't choose to send an official
Right.
representative, but it doesn't mean they don't email us and provide input. So it's going well.
Okay.
And
Well, there's a lot of information to digest from neighborhood councils with the planning, the transportation, the public safety. There's so many different areas that they cover. I know one issue that came up with transportation was in the valley where they did the radar surveys. Some neighborhood councils didn't understand the process, didn't understand the law. They objected to it, which, coming from law enforcement for over 40 years, I understand the rules, the regulations, the procedures, the law that we have to subscribe to. Well, some neighborhood councils don't think that those work. The fact of the matter is we have to comply with the law, and the only option is to change the law if we don't work and if the courts uphold that. So that issue came up where some neighborhood councils didn't want the speed limit increased for radar use, but we can't use radar unless the speed's increased. The officers won't go out and enforce it unless they've got radar. So it came to be somewhat of a complicated mess just because of lack of understanding. And the fact is, we have to comply with the law. We can't assert our own philosophy that doesn't comply with the law when we're doing speed surveys and other components where it comes to public safety.
But in 75% of the cases where those complaints happen, it's the result of not being allowed to provide input in time. And it's true, education is important.
Well, they had input, they just didn't agree with it. That was the problem. So they had input, but their input was, we don't agree with this, we don't like this, we don't want this. I'm the council member, Mr. Smith's the council member from the adjoining district, where we've been asking for more enforcement, and the LAPD is very candid. They said, we'll enforce it as long as we have radar. We're not going to be chasing cars down the street like we used to do. As when I was a motor officer, we'd chase the cars. It's dangerous. The officers don't do that anymore. So the new trend is you use radar for speed, and if you don't have radar, they're not going to be chasing cars and clocking as they did in the past. It's a whole new technology. It's a whole new philosophy, officer safety. So, back in the Wild West, they rode horses. Well, now they ride motorcycles with radar, and if you don't let them use that equipment, they don't go do the enforcement, which is a problem that we have to deal with. So how do we correct that? We follow the law, or we change the law when it comes to the radar. But they came down and testified, actually, at Transportation Committee, objecting to what we were trying to do to increase safety in the community. And that was clearly, to my understanding, a lack of understanding of what the requirements are. So I think this whole process is going to work well. It'll give them the information. It'll educate them in the process, because traffic continues to be a situation that we all have to deal with every day. So I'm going to announce the arrival of the chairperson, Councilmember Alarcon.
Thank you.
And we're on number one. We're just finishing this.
Is that all?
Well, you know what? I waited. We've only been going for 3 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. We're just about finished with this item number one. If you have any other input on number one.
Well,
We've heard from the
I understand
department.
the MOU is not ready,
They're working on it.
and I was just wondering if we could expedite the time frame. I think,
We're looking in October.
October?
October.
I
Well,
was
they're still
told-
working
I
with
was
Labor
told
Council.
Good morning.
I was told
Mr.
August. I was just wondering if we could expedite.
Well, I
it a
think
little
we hope to have a draft in August, but we want to give the city attorney time to review it before we release it to all the neighborhood councils for review.
bit.
And we do not know how long that city attorney process will take.
That's why he came up with October
But
for the final.
But the delay, Mr. Alarcon, is not the department. It's because it takes neighborhood councils longer
Yeah.
to provide input, go back to their councils, come back and provide additional input and so on to the process. So that's what takes the time.
Okay, I understand. I was just hoping that, there may be, with new council members, one new council member for sure, well, two council members, no, one council member,
One.
starting July 1st.
We don't know who it is, though.
There may be different committees, and we don't know who's going to serve on which committees, so.
We don't even know who the new councilman is going to be yet.
Oh, not
That's right,
determined yet?
that's right.
Yeah, we're trying
They
to
haven't
figure that out.
determined
So, okay, with that, then we'll continue item number one until, what, till August?
I'd say
Don't we
90.
want to have the first draft back and then
Well,
for the
but the
final?
first draft is expected in August, right?
Correct.
So let's make it the later meeting in August.
Okay.
Are you in session the second? I think you're in recess, aren't you, sir? Second week?
We take a week off in August.
Yeah, take like 10 days or so.
Perfect.
Well, somewhere around there. It'll be somewhere in August.
Sometime around then, we'll come
Thank
back.
you.
The latest meeting in August.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Item number 2 is a city attorney report relative to a strategy for implementation of Neighborhood Council Review Commission Recommendation 8F regarding revisions to the city council rules.
Good morning, Councilmember Zine and Alarcon. Peter King with the City Attorney's Office. The recommendation 8A through H have to do with the Neighborhood Council's early notification system, early warning system. This report has to do with recommendation 8, subpart F, and specifically the NCRC recommended that the council rules 16 and 23 be amended to add very specific language that states, when such items are introduced before the council, the clerk will note for the record that the early warning requirements of Charter Section 907 have been waived. Charter Section 907 essentially says that an early notification system will be provided to the neighborhood councils, and indeed It has been. And it also requires that the notification system be designed to provide notice to the neighborhood councils as soon as practical. Well, the way that Council Rules 16 and in particular 23 work is that nothing is, for instance, when you use Council Rule 23, nothing is on the agenda because you actually make the findings to put on an urgency basis something on the agenda that wasn't there before. And of course, Rule 16 is to waive things out of committee. So in effect, they're suggesting in the language that they've recommended that somehow you have to waive the early notification system, and indeed you don't. I mean, you're providing notice as soon as practical when you use those two rules. So we haven't specifically recommended that you do adopt this rule to change your own council rules, but that you perhaps, if you're so inclined, add some, in a footnote, if you will, that when you use Council Rules 16 or 23, that the Council Journal reflect the city clerk note for the Council Journal that you couldn't provide notification to the neighborhood councils.
It would be impractical, impossible.
Exactly.
Okay.
Technically, is there anything wrong with the way things are right now?
I don't believe so. There's not. I mean, you are providing notification through a subscription process on the neighborhood council's early warning system, and people can go on and get information as soon as the city clerk and others are putting it out.
So when a 16 or 23 is posted, they can get information as long as they're monitoring that.
20, yeah, and 23 probably wouldn't be posted because that's something you do right there at the council meeting. It's not on the agenda. And that's and to imply that you have to waive something in 907 when you're taking something on an urgency basis is, we just felt, well, that's the wrong implication. You have the authority to do that, and we've always stated in our previous opinions that that there's nothing more to do in that respect.
Mr. Chairman, Paul Smith, CLA. In the main, we concur with the analysis that's been provided to you by the City Attorney's Office. We would like to have this matter continued, sent back to our office or report to you. We think the council rules, as they are currently stated with 16 and 23, provide adequate notification because these are items that come up on an intermittent basis because they are of a need to move on in a rapid processing. But we would like to have this brought back to our office, and we'll report back to you in 2 weeks.
This matter is also going to Rules and Government Committee.
Sorry about that. I'm fine with sending it back to the city.
CLA office.
Yeah, we have Mr. McQuiston.
We have public comment, Mr. McQuiston.
Jim McQuiston, you have my statement. Let me explain what I'm getting at in my statement succinctly. I think Councilmember Zine has expressed several times surprise at how the neighborhood council system worked out because he was on the committee that got up the idea in the first place. And I certainly attended many of those, and I was also surprised. But there is another issue involved here, which is really a broader issue. We can always make rules to get around things that we really don't like to do. The problem with neighborhood councils is that they were supposed to be private attorney generals, and they have been twisted by a combination of mayor and city attorney so that they do not function as private attorney generals. So we don't really have a filling that vacuum, which we need sorely in this. The city council cannot control the mayor anymore. We need an outside person that's controlling the mayor, and those outside persons, if they're poor, cannot control the mayor because they don't have the funds. That was what was supposed to be what we went for in this whole Article 9. Now, the problem is, once again, the city attorney has figured out that he works for the corporation. He doesn't work for the people. There could be a different way to handle this matter. The problem is, what happens if the city council just decides that they want to do something quick and dirty? Now, I'm not saying that anyone on this council is heinous. Far from it.
At least this committee.
I think they are doing their best, and maybe they don't have all the information they need, but that's life. However, we do have to have a way that the city council says, hey, you know, maybe we should put this over. Maybe it isn't as serious as we think. And let's let someone else take a look at it because we don't have time. And that's where the neighborhood councils do fit into the picture. The interesting thing is if the city attorney had represented the people at the commission level, this probably would have been phrased a lot differently than it was when they got up this 8F. And that was a definite problem with the city attorney, just like the telephone tax was a definite problem with the city attorney. We do have to do something about the way the city attorney operates. And that was the basic thrust of my argument. But you notice I also put a box on both houses. I said that the neighborhood councils are not doing their job anyway, and we have to get that corrected.
Thank you. Has there been any problem? Has there been any claim filed against an action of the council with regard to section Rule 16 or Rule 20? Was it 23 or 28? 23, right? So what are we trying to fix here?
It's a good point. What are we trying to fix?
I mean, I'm not suggesting that every single Rule 16 or Rule 23 is perfectly defensible, but I don't know that anybody's complained about a specific matter. And if there is a recourse, if somebody feels that something does not fall into the category of Rule 16 or Rule 23, then what action would they take?
They could bring a lawsuit.
They could file something.
They could file a lawsuit. So
Yeah, I mean, you have to, under Rule 23, you have to make very specific findings as
I
to
think
why you need to take this up
Right.
at council immediately.
Yeah.
And there's no time for, agendizing this type of thing. And you have to have the flexibility as a city council to do that.
There's no question that the rules of notification can sometimes impede the rules of law. And I think rules of law have precedent. And there are times when we have to act. Now, there are times when I wonder if a Rule 16 or Rule 23 is technically falls into the specific definitions, but nobody's complained. So
Well, it came up from the Neighborhood Council Review Commission, so somehow it was generated from that when they reviewed.
that's exactly my point. It was generated because of their cry for notification, but it's not as if there's a problem.
They get notification, just not getting notification on 1623 in what they believe is a timely manner.
Exactly.
On a 23, there is no prior notification, and because it's coming up as a matter of urgency before the council, and the city attorney states there's a process for doing that. On a 16, there's also a matter of urgency, but it's posted. We
Well, they're
post it and
trying-
we
they're
hold it
trying to
over for a
expedite
week.
Whatever we're doing now, they're trying to expedite the notification, which to me, if, I would have no problem spending time working on expediting the notification if I felt there were problems. But there haven't been any problems. Nobody, not a single complaint has been registered against a Rule 16 or Rule 23 action in council.
Just as a
And we don't do them that often, when you really think about
No,
it.
both of them are not done that often. And remember, the rules around 16 are that they really need the approval of the chair of the committee. They're really not a policy matter. There are more things that need to have an urgency just to move forward in the process. But they're not policy matters. They're not substantial matters.
8 was bundled as 8A through H subparts. Basically, 8A says that you'll upgrade and modernize the online council file index. B is that you'll establish a system to automatically send electronic notices to persons who have requested it. C is city agenda items shall list the affected neighborhood councils. D, the city council shall establish recommended standard for early notification as a minimum of 60 days. And E is a reasonable opportunity for input as a minimum of 7 calendar days. So they were all
Frankly-
bundled to
frankly,
try and just improve the system.
What does F say, specific language on F? That they have, the specific language on 8F? That they have?
8F says, notwithstanding the above, Council Rules 16 and 23 will continue to allow the City Council to handle matters on an urgency or expedited basis. So they're acknowledging that you need to do that. But then it says, and I think this is where they're off key, the NCRC recommends that you revise Council Rules 16 and 23 to include very specific language. When such items are introduced before the councils, the city clerk will note for the record that requirements of Charter Section 907 have been waived. The requirements of 907 are that you give them a reasonable opportunity for input.
We can't waive a charter requirement.
Well,
I mean,
exactly. That's why I say it's just
illegal.
a little off key.
Well, I mean, if they want to do that, then tell them to go to the vote, because they're going to have to change the charter. The council rules can't be, on their face, illegal, and they would be. So I simply can't agree with that. But here's, I think the critical point is, if the council, I would look at this in reverse. If we impose these rules, I could envision circumstances particularly under declared emergencies, where we could be held responsible for not acting, just because we want to notify some folks. And there are times when we have to act, and I just don't understand what the problem is here. I mean, if they want, I'm not sure that the neighborhood councils care a whole lot about this. If they did, they would be complaining about the Rule 16s and 23s that we're doing illegally. But we do notify them, and they do have the option to just turn on Channel 35 and watch the council as it's being aired, and complain within a couple of hours, technically. And actually, they can probably pick up the phone and call the council before the meeting is over, and register their complaint if they thought something was wrong. But I just don't get the sense that this first of all, I don't get the sense that Council Rules 16 and 23 are being abused. And secondly, we haven't had any complaint whatsoever about them in specific.
The city attorney's office agrees with you wholeheartedly, and that's why we do not recommend.
Has Dunn had any complaints on this? None? Okay, that's fine.
So what I'd like to do is send this back to the CLA at their request, but I'm not inclined to change anything here, quite frankly.
We could just note and file the whole matter if you wanted to.
On two.
Okay.
Thank you.
Note and file.
Note and file.
That would be my inclination.
Yeah, note and file.
Okay.
Don't file.
Is this about the Rule 16? or-
Yes.
Yeah.
So that the idea was just to put like a comment,
Well, if we were waiving charter section,
right?
then
Yeah.
we'd be in violation of the charter.
Well,
We can't waive the charter. The city council cannot waive the charter,
even if two charter reform commissioners who wrote it said it's okay.
especially with two charter.
Especially with.
Okay,
Make it one
so
minute.
that's not, but I thought you were waiving, oh, I see, you're waiving section 900, I see, as
Cannot
opposed to
waive.
245 or a Rule 23 where you're waiving council rules.
The recommendation
I
of
see.
the review commission is patently illegal.
If you look at 16 and 23, though, I mean, like you said, it doesn't set policy. There's issues that are what we believe to be critical. You have to convince the
And
city
the
attorney
23
colleagues.
23 has its own rules. I mean, its own processes, and, you know, you actually vote on taking the matter up, and it has to have, meet certain criteria.
And Gwen Poindexter, City Attorney, just to add to that, and remember, Rule 23 is basically premised on the Brown Act that allows for you to take immediate action, so it's kind of patterned on state law.
But we technically are violating section 900 when we do that. Well, by,
No.
No. Remember, it says to take all practical actions, all
Oh,
practical.
practical, okay.
And then 16 is
When
something that's,
practical.
I got-
Notification when.
okay.
practical.
I see.
Okay?
And my point is that we've never had a complaint about a specific Rule 16 or 20
It hasn't been violated or abused.
notification. Nobody's ever filed a lawsuit against us.
All right.
So
Next item.
I would suggest we note and file this.
Yeah.
Mr. Zine agrees. You agree, or?
Yeah. I mean, I think, are the neighborhood councils here today? They speaking? Shim,
Mr. O'Quist spoke on it.
yeah,
They were
Right.
notified.
yeah.
Hasn't been a problem.
Okay. That doesn't really mean, I mean, that's not a reason to act or not act because it wasn't a problem, but,
Well, if it was a problem, then we should act.
yeah. Okay.
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 Then that matter will be noted and filed. Item 3.
Item number 3 is a motion, Han Alarcon, relative to the development of an outreach plan for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, working with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to neighbor councils in the Los Angeles Unified School District on water conservation.
Good morning. Wendy
morning.
Yancey, Manager of Government and Neighborhood Relations for DWP. The motion was twofold. One was the outreach to neighborhood councils, and then it added the LAUSD component.
Right.
John Chin, the Director of Customer Services, is here, and he will be able to address that. But summarily, we have already conducted 2 if you would, general meetings, March 14th as well as April 18th, on water conservation. And then we have planned 5 from June 10th through June 27th in other parts of the city. For example, our LADWP facility on Crenshaw and King, our South Valley facility on Van Nuys and Satakoy, or at the Browdy Building. That hasn't been confirmed just yet. We'll also go to the harbor area as well as West LA to comply with the motion. But council members, what I'd like to point out is that we've been working with the MOU for a few years now, and what we have found that the attendance of those general meetings is not well attended. So we have actually augmented our staff. We've added, I have a total of 3 now, and they've divvied up the city geographically, and they work with the neighborhood councils as well as the council field offices in their areas. And so they've been visiting the field offices as well as the individual neighborhood council meetings. We find that if we go to them, we've been better served that way.
Obviously, yeah.
So thus far, from April till now, we've visited 43. There's over 80, so I do plan on making sure we do visit all 80 some odd. I think it's close to 90 at this point, prior to July 1. And so, and then I'll let John speak to the relationship with LAUSD.
That's, with training on
Water conservation.
water conservation, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
just wondering what
What's the point of this?
maker of the motion meant by contextual format.
It
Strategize a
doesn't sound like my
contextual format.
language. You seconded it.
I thought it was great.
Who's that?
I should blame you for seconding it.
What technically the department should be reporting back is what,
We did, so did we?
after working with Dunn, what they recommend in terms of strategizing a contextual format on outreach.
Okay. Excuse me?
They're to present a report on strategizing a contextual format on outreach to our
Right.
local neighborhood councils.
Right,
That's half of the motion.
right.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by contextual format.
What did we mean by a contextual format? That just does not sound like my language. Did you write that? Contextual format? I don't know what that means.
Sounds like Pepperdine graduate.
I know. I mean, clearly, I don't know. That is not a word I've ever used in my life. I don't know how it showed up in one of my motions.
You've used
but
it here.
I know. I mean, obviously, the point was, we would, and I'd love for, you to step in, Bon Wang. I mean, what's going on? I mean, most neighborhood councils feel like they did not know what was going on with conservation.
I think the bottom line.
I mean, I think the majority of people in Los Angeles don't know
spreading the
what's
word
going on
about
with
the
conservation. People
conservation.
still don't understand about the Monday, Thursday landscaping. People still don't they do not, I'm telling you, I talk to normal people all the time, and they do not understand what we're trying to do. So it was my idea, contextual or otherwise, that, we figure out a way for DWP to connect with our grassroots, network in Los Angeles, which is neighborhood councils, and have some sort of a real plan for educating. Because I voted against the shortage rate because I felt like the first thing we should do is educate before we begin penalizing people. So I just was reaching out to DWP, neighborhood councils. I think you're right. I think you got to go to them. I think these regional meetings are not well attended, and I don't blame people. These are neighborhood council folks are already meeting once a month. They got subcommittees. These are the kind of people that are probably involved in a lot of other things in their communities and neighborhoods. They show up at a lot of events, so I can see how they wouldn't want to come to one of your facilities to be educated.
But in addition to just, we've done a broader outreach too, just to all of our customer base, if you will. So, for example, when we actually do attend the neighborhood council meetings, we have information, flyers, et cetera. And those flyers were actually made available online, and a neighborhood council blast went out to all the neighborhood councils. That blast was, initially the emails are composed of the DUNS information, and so we actually send out email blasts. The beauty also of visiting each neighborhood council is that we tell them about
Right.
the website, which is totally devoted to neighborhood councils. It's LADWP
Right.
Neighborhood
What about
News,
all the people that aren't hooked up?
as well as
There's a lot of people that are not hooked up to the internet, by the way.
Well, let's stick with the neighborhood councils, which is the motion before us. We have the neighborhood councils and LAUSD. So with regard to the neighborhood councils, you're saying that we have a website
Yes.
that is dedicated to neighborhood councils where water conservation is
highlighted.
highlighted.
Yes, sir.
But more than that, you're going to every single neighborhood council
Each one.
and
Yeah.
providing a presentation of half an hour, 15 minutes.
In some instances, we're allowed 10 to 15 minutes. In others, we speak during government comment. And then the beauty of that is that the folks in attendance, they know we're there and they provide information. The staff is trained and they can interpret bills, et cetera, and follow up with the customers who have additional questions.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much more we can ask than DWP going to every single.
Also,
neighborhood
the,
council.
Yeah.
the website is actually interactive, and we receive questions and inquiries, if you will, and then we can respond back to. And we have oftentimes individuals who are. I'm not a customer, but my mom and dad are. Can you help me? And so forth and so on. And so it's actually proven to be a great tool.
Again, if we can just focus on the neighborhood council.
And I only mention that because they came through that venue, because it is a special logon to get to the LADWP.
You're not a customer of DWP?
Those
Me
two-
personally,
I-
unfortunately, I do live in the county unincorporated area. a block away from the city, so.
Did you drink the water?
That's shocking.
Oh, never mind.
We did approve a citizens oversight panel in this process. What's happening with that?
The citizens, when we adopted the water rate increase, we approved a number of citizen committees. One was
Right.
the Low Income Lifeline, and one was the oversight
Right.
of the infrastructure programs. And we also,
Is that citizens panel been formulated or formed?
it is not completed yet.
Why
We
not?
have met with the city staff and did the update on the infrastructure, but we have not, those committees have not convened. We have, however, provided neighborhood council. Our MOU calls for us to do workshops on a very regular basis. We've chosen monthly, and the topics differ from month to month. Just recently, of course, it was our budget. But going forward, and hence, we've actually had a workshop on infrastructure improvements, advising them of what has been done and where we're going with both of those programs, both water and power.
So how do you think it's going, Bongwan?
We haven't worked.
Is this outreach penetrating with neighborhood councils?
Bongwan Kim, Neighborhood Empowerment. We haven't worked directly with DWP, as they've stated they chose to go directly to neighborhood councils, and I think that's fine. I don't really have a good sense of the reach with which neighborhood councils fully understand the conservation program. I think my understanding of the contextual format
Really?
is that
Explain that.
oftentimes city departments have a difficult time understanding how neighborhood councils operate. They're a different animal than city departments. So I've been offering our department to serve as a conduit, as a clearinghouse of resources, because it's often hard to reach out to all 89 neighborhood councils. Even
But-
DWP has a hard time reaching out to all
But
89.
DWP has not consulted with you.
They have not on a
To the
significant
bill.
basis.
See, that's a problem, guys.
And I actually,
a
just
problem.
to interject just
Yeah.
a little bit, our staff actually do work together. My staff has assured me that they've been in contact with his staff, sharing this information so that they can also bring it out to the meetings they attend. So
I just
perhaps
have
the
this
directors
con- I
have
just-
it.
I just have this concept, particularly with the general manager of Dunn, that, you meet with other general managers of different departments and try to help departments understand neighborhood councils and understand what works best with them. I mean, that's been my vision since the department was created and since all the general managers have been there. It never seems to quite work that way.
My sense is that when
think that's a
when
problem.
you walk into a neighborhood council, and I'll use myself as an example, when I walk into a neighborhood council, they may or may not appreciate your presentation because they have agenda items they want to hear. And unless the item is agendized, then it's not appreciated. It's just any teacher knows that the best student is the one who wants to learn about what you're teaching. But when we walk in casually into a meeting and speak at public comment, it's not the most effective way to educate because they've got other business to do. And so I think a better course of action would be to reach out to the neighborhood councils, tell them we have a presentation available if they would like to agendize it for their members. We think it's very important, blah, blah, blah. And then those who want to have that presentation, they will be a much more alert and attentive student. And so I think.
Well, yeah,
would be
I agree with
a-
you. And the motion specifically says, I move for LADWP to work with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to strategize this contextual format on outreach. That was the motion. The motion was,
normal person did not write that.
huh?
A normal person.
No, I agree. So I agree. But the normal part of that was to work together. It wasn't for you just to go out on your own and start hitting neighborhood councils. And I disagree. I mean, you should, in Bongwan, I'm going to give you a little, it's not okay. It's not okay. You shouldn't say, well, that's fine. They went out to neighborhood councils. It's really not okay. This was about, again, your expertise with neighborhood councils. I mean, you're their general manager. You're the manager of the department that exists only to empower neighborhood councils. That's the only reason your department exists. So you are the expert. So it's not okay that DWP just decides on their own, this is how we're going to do it. They try regional meetings and they don't work. Now they're going out. That was the whole point of this, was work with Dunn to strategize on how do we take this very serious message of water conservation and educate our greatest network of community activists, and that's neighborhood councils.
Let me put this in historical context.
Okay.
Have we taken action on this item before?
No.
Then let's understand that the motion asks for an explanation for a plan of implementation.
Yeah.
DWP is already implemented.
Well-
Whether or not it's the plan we agree to, the item before us is to hear about the plan for implementation. And so I think the concerns that have been raised is perhaps a better understanding between Dunn and DWP as to what that plan is. It's not clear what that strategic plan is for implementation.
Well, and it's also, I mean,
Conservation
it's also,
education.
my feeling was, it wasn't just to hear their plan, it was to strategize together on what would be the best way to
I'm
do
just going
this.
by the motion.
No, that's what that says.
It says.
Work
to
with
have
Dunn.
Neighborhood councils come
Work with Dunn,
To our
and they haven't
committee
done that. They haven't done.
to
they haven't-
explain the plan for implementation.
After they've worked with Dunn, to strategize. Strategize to
Right.
me is almost the key word of that instead of implementation. It's strategize.
And I'm
That
more
had
I'm more
almost
than
happened.
I'm more than willing to work with DWP and for every city department because it is important to
You
have a
have to.
strategy to outreach
It
to
is.
neighborhood councils, and you have
So
to be
strategy-
proactive.
I'll tell you what.
What?
We're spending too much time on this one item. I'd like to get a report back, a written report back on what that plan is. Let me ask you, can we move over to the LAUSD portion? What can you tell us about the educational program with LAUSD?
Yes, good morning, council members. John Chen with Power One Power. We have been working closely with LAUSD. As a matter of fact, currently they have several classes that they are training their students to audit the schools. And the plan is to audit 120 LAUSD high school or middle school so that we will know exactly what the fixture, what type of usage they have for each of the campuses. And then we can have an implementation plan to replace those inefficient, for example, toilets or urinals. So that program is ongoing. In addition to that, as far as the education component, we're also working closely with the Los Angeles City College because they have 9 different campuses throughout the city of Los Angeles, and they are creating a curriculum to teach those students about water conservation, then also assign field work to those students going out to the community. And by the way, 60% of those students are low-income students, according to their stats.
Okay, I do want to focus on the LAUSD, which
Yes.
is the motion before us.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask for the same thing. In 30 days, can we get a written report as to what the plan for implementation of outreach to our neighborhood councils for water conservation and a similar plan for LAUSD? Just tell us what you got, and then we'll go from there. How's that?
Well, it's not the motion, but you're clearly wanting to ignore the motion, so.
I'm not trying to ignore
Yes,
the
you
motion.
are.
I'm trying to get some
Yeah,
written
I don't
report.
want DWP's plan. You're missing that. I want I want a report on how DWP and Dunn are strategizing to create the plan. I want to see it's a dual plan. It's not DWP's plan. So if you want to ignore that, fine.
I'm not
If you don't wanna-
ignoring it. I'm reading your motion. You call for a plan for implementation.
No, I called for strategizing.
No, you call for a plan for implementation. It's the last 3 words.
You can't have the last 3 words without the first paragraph.
I understand that, but if you want a plan, I'm asking for a written plan. I don't know how that's ignoring your motion.
It is, because I don't want a plan.
Then fine. Then let's receive and file this motion.
You know what I want, Wendy.
I will make sure that we work with Bong Wong, but I'll also have to work with the sensitivities of our oversight committee, the MOU oversight committee, who suggests ways of how to reach out to the neighborhood councils as per the MOU. And that's one reason why we took this path as far as going and visit each one, because they felt that was best. Not ignoring
So you're
your
saying that
motion,
your
just-
MOU group is opposed to you working with Dunn?
No. I'm just saying that they've told us in the past that the general meetings don't work and to visit the neighborhood council individual meetings, and that we'd get more bang for our buck, if you will, if we do it that way as opposed to, because as you mentioned, these are busy people. Another meeting is just not that
Right, you think
agreeable
maybe
to them
if you
at
met
all
with-
times.
With
And
Bong Wong in the
we
first
will.
place, you might have learn that as well?
Councilmember, okay, yes. But we've been working with them, as you know, for since '05 now, and we've come a long way. This is where we are now. That we know that, and that's one reason why we made sure we augmented staff, was because we do need to visit each and every neighborhood council, have a relationship with those
Right.
representatives, et
Well,
cetera.
I want the plan, but the plan should be based on the two of you strategizing on what works best.
Okay, going forward, we will.
That's what I want.
We'll do.
Be more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding the schools. Water conservation workshops throughout various LAUSD schools. One of the concerns, LAUSD uses a lot of water, not only on the urinals, the restrooms, but on the fields, the athletic fields, the vegetation, a tremendous amount of water. None of it's recycled. Some of the schools want to move forward with athletic turf, with the, I forgot the technical term for it, but it's the...
Drought tolerant California
But
climate plans.
It's not grass, but it is that synthetic. AstroTurf.
Okay.
And some of the private schools have done that. There's no water required. They save millions of gallons of water annually. And some of the schools want to move forward with that. If you could also find out how LAUSD, with their build-out of the bond measure to build campuses, can incorporate some of the new technology which eliminates the use of water on the field, because those fields take a tremendous amount of water in that endeavor with water and power. It saves you folks water, it saves the drainage of water, and at the same time, it conserves the water. So when you're discussing with LAUSD, see, because they're building a bunch of campuses,
Yes.
maybe they can incorporate it in there because they've got billions of dollars in bond money, and this technology is relatively new from when they started building schools. So something along those lines.
Okay.
Which
we'll
would
do
save
that.
a whole lot of water.
Yes, that makes sense. And also, we have a rebate program that facilitates this implementation, so
Okay.
we'll make sure.
I don't think they've been approached with that, but I think it's a wonderful idea if we're talking about saving water and working together with the communities.
Okay.
Okay. You gonna report back?
30 days, Councilmember? Is that-
Fine.
Okay, thank you.
Item 4.
Item num-
Oh, go ahead, Darrell.
Item number 4 is the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment reports in response to a motion, Han Gruel, relative to assessing the feasibility of providing sexual harassment training to all elected neighborhood council board members.
Bong Wen Kim, Neighborhood Empowerment. Per the motion by councilpersons Han and Gruel, our department followed up with the Personnel Department, and you may recall that they had a sexual harassment video training that was being made available to city employees. We adapted that and made copies, DVDs, and sent it out to all the Neighborhood Council board members, so it's available for their viewing. What we'd like to do in our revamped website, which will be launched in October this year, is to have as many of these training videos available on demand on our website. So when our website is up, this training video will also be up there. There is when we went with Personnel Department, there was a sexual harassment training that all city employees are required to take. That's 4 hours in length. We felt that was a little too much for neighborhood councils. This video is less than 30 minutes, so we felt it was more accessible, but gives them the essence of the information that they need to know to prevent sexual harassment and that kind of behavior.
How do we verify they've actually seen the video and not let it collect dust?
Can we focus on the item before us? The motion is that the Neighborhood Council Review Commission be requested to discuss the idea of requiring that all Neighborhood Council board members be given training on sexual harassment at regular intervals. Can you report on that, Mr. Kim?
My understanding was that the training that we were going to provide was primarily through this video.
Right.
That's not what's before us. The motion is
Right.
that the Neighborhood Council Review Commission be requested to discuss the idea of requiring that all Neighborhood Council board members be given training on sexual harassment at regular intervals. So first of all, has the Neighborhood Council Review Commission been requested to discuss the idea?
I
Just a
believe
point of
it.
clarification, Gwen Poindexter, City Attorney. This is a continued item, so the actual agenda item is the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment report in response to that motion. And I think in previous meetings, we had the discussion by the NCRC Commission.
Right, I'd like to get some, right.
Suggested that we do a sexual harassment training.
Right, and if I could also add a little bit of clarification, they did discuss it, and one of the things they said was pretty much what you just said. The 4-hour one that we give to city employees was a little much. They wanted to have one that was kind of revamped and tweaked for neighborhood councils. At the time, Channel 35, I think, said they were going to pick up the cost of revising this video, so I don't know if that's happened with the budget issues.
That was done.
That was done. Okay, so that we've created it, and and Channel 35 picked up the cost.
Yes.
Okay, so
And we made copies and distributed to all the neighborhood council board members. Whether they each one views that, unless we put some kind of consequence to not viewing it, it gets hard to really implement at that level. But we've made it clear that it's a council motion and that they're going to be required to view it.
Have we had any problems in the sexual harassment field with neighborhood councils?
I think we
Litigation?
did.
We've had problems. The extent of the problems is not fully known, but I've run into instances where it could easily be perceived as sexual harassment.
Right, so I think the point was, did the commission say the neighborhood council should be given this video regular intervals? And they said yes.
Yes.
So I think the question is, as Dennis said, how do we implement that? How do we make sure that they're doing that?
Well, one way we might approach it is like the way that we're approaching the ethics requirement training that by state law neighborhood councils are mandated to do. But my last update, about a little more than a third of them had completed it. What my approach is through transparency. So we have a board database that's public, and what I'd like to do is add a field that says they've complied with ethics training. On my commission, when we have the database available, we'll be making a list to each council member available of each neighborhood council, how many board members have completed the ethics training. We could add sexual harassment training to that as well. That way, we're approaching it through more of public transparency as opposed to a requirement. So that's the approach that I've been trying to, that I will be taking in terms of the trainings that we think neighborhood councils should be required to have versus what's optional.
I should ask the city attorney, if a neighborhood council member sexually harasses another neighborhood council member, could the city be held liable?
It's possible. It's tort litigation. It depends on what the immunities are. It depends on whether the activity would be deemed by the city attorney who would be analyzing this as within the scope of authority. Some cases the city has defended, and some cases the city has not.
So let's take a case where it's not a board member to board member. A board member is attending a neighborhood council event, and somebody in the community is harassed.
Again, it's possible. I mean, I can't really give you an answer on this.
But the answer is it's possible.
Sure, it's possible.
So,
that's why we have the training.
The question is whether we want to require the training or not. And if we want to require the training, the leverage that we have, and I think it's reasonable, is that we could hold their money, or we could, because that is not required by the charter. But we might be able to hold, I don't know, we might be able to hold their authority to act as a board member if they do not have certain kinds of training. Is that a reasonable?
It's possible. We have to probably do some plan amendments or ordinance changes for that. If you're talking about holding an individual board member, hold their seat in abeyance until they take it. We've had those conversations off and on.
Well, if we've had problems already, then I think that we should do that to protect the city as well as the integrity of the neighborhood councils. I mean, we as elected officials have to take that training, and by law in the state of California, we're required to take it. So I'm not saying we have to have an ordinance requirement. Something should be done so it's not just here's a video and view it at your convenience. Since we've already had some issues, we don't need any more issues.
But to what extent are we required as council members to get sexual harassment training.
You know, I'd have to
I don't think you're
report back
required
to you.
to. I mean,
I'm not sure.
they're not going to hold your office from you if you don't take the training. You just better be careful.
That's required by state law. There's a state law that mandates,
Well, there's a state law that mandates ethics training, and
sexual harassment
Okay.
training.
Right.
But what are the repercussions if you don't do it?
that I don't know. I have to get back to you on that.
We've all taken it.
Yeah, I don't think they hold your office.
I don't know.
That's what I was
I mean,
saying.
they could prosecute you for violating the state law.
Well,
They wanna do
we
that.
require them to take ethics training, right? The neighborhood
Yes.
council board members?
Yes.
Or what?
We're pursuing administrative remedies right now to see if we can move the needle in terms of compliance. But if we feel like neighborhood councils are really not taking it seriously, then the commission is going to explore more serious consequences. One example might be withholding their authority to vote.
Right. I think you add sexual harassment training as a part of that. I mean, I think that becomes
No, I appreciate it.
ethics training.
Anytime. Oh, anytime.
I mean, I think you ought to just include that. So whatever you do in terms of ethics training, I think you ought to include sexual harassment training. And then if you guys deem that there should be a more serious consequence for either one, then I think they're together.
Well, that of course begs the question about racial or ethnic discrimination as well. Should we look at that in addition to the sexual harassment?
Yes.
Right?
I
Because then we'd have to put in another training component with that, similar to the sexual harassment video training. Then we could look at it as a comprehensive package in terms of discrimination.
I mean, that would be your call.
I for
As a
one would
town
like to see.
I just think it stands out if you just do sexual harassment.
Maybe-
you know.
Well,
I
do
took it
we-
for granted.
What do we
They're not
do?
required.
We don't take anything with related to that.
Yeah, we don't. We don't take any training related to that. We're just trying to kind of be the same.
That's what elected officials are
Yeah.
required to do.
Mhm.
I see.
And other city employees.
Yeah.
All right.
Actually, at the state level, we were required to, weren't we?
Not racial discrimination.
Not racial discrimination?
Yeah, just sexual discrimination.
And ethics.
Oh.
And ethics.
Right. We're just trying to be fair.
Okay.
I think what we should do, whatever we think could arise. First of all, we have to meet the law,
Mhm.
which we think the sexual harassment and ethics training does. But then we need to anticipate whether we think we're going to get sued because somebody's acting foolishly out there.
Right.
And if that's the case, then we should require some training, at least to protect ourselves, that we tried. So we would leave that in your hands.
Mhm.
And if you think that there's something we should add to protect the city, then you should report it to this committee.
I'll work with my commission and
Do you,
provide you with an update.
will you have more information on this subject in 30 days?
More information in terms of how many are responding, or
Mm-hmm.
probably not. Since we issued it in June, we probably want to give it a few more months. I could issue a couple of reminders.
So every
the
neighborhood
board
council
member.
has a copy of this
Yes.
video. Who has it? The president?
The president. So if you wanted an update in terms of how many board members have actually seen it, then we probably want to give it a few more months to give them some time.
I would think it would be more than just giving them a couple more months. I think you would have to communicate that, you
Give 'em a
expect
deadline.
for all
Yeah.
board members to have viewed it by. I don't think you just leave it out there and say, give them a few more months.
Sure.
Because if they're not watching it now, they're not going to be watching it in a few more months.
Right. So I will issue another memo to the neighborhood council boards, giving them a deadline, and then after the deadline, I'll come back and report to you on what the participation rate is.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Are there any public comment cards?
I don't think-
Okay, this meeting's adjourned.
I